Hi there, this is Tamara Tabo, of course, and I wanted to share with you a quick demonstration of the electronic survey instrument that I created a draft of for our curriculum mapping project at the law school. And I will talk a little bit about some of the design elements, the mechanics of how I built this survey a little later, but basically, I want to kind of give the overall rationale for why I decided to create an online electronic version of the survey, what some of I perceived our needs to be, and then also just give you a quick demo of kind of what it looks like in terms of the user end experience. So, and of course, you can follow up with me and with questions, and we'll talk about this more. But so what I perceived as some of our needs for this project, where we're trying to, during the course of interviews with faculty members, conversations with faculty members, gather all of this information, all of this data about exactly what it is that is going on in many of our courses at the law school, where particularly these competencies, these skills that we know are so important, when they're being introduced to students, when students may be getting a second exposure, exactly what the instructional activities, whether they're in the classroom, outside of the classroom, experiential, what the activities might be like in terms of instruction, also what sorts of assessments, if any, formative assessments, summative assessments, no assessments at all, whether that may be a piece of students' exposure to each of these skill areas. We have obviously a lot of information to try to collect during the course of individual conversations, and so we know that managing all of this information in an organized way is a pretty big challenge. So we knew that we needed a script for our faculty interviews, something that we could all use regardless of who was conducting the interview. We would essentially be relying on the same language. We wanted something that was usable in that way. We also knew that we were going to need to organize the data that we were collecting. And that was going to be a big challenge because, of course, the more data that we're getting during the course of the interview or the survey that's purely narrative, the more work we need to do on the back end in terms of managing that, coding the data, extracting from those narratives the sort of objective bits and pieces that we're looking for. So we knew that we needed something in terms of the survey that was going to lend itself to that kind of organized data analysis. So that was another thing that I sort of had in mind. The other thing was we certainly wanted the survey instrument and the script to be consistent. We want to be equally thorough with each of the professors we're talking to, just for the sake of the reliability of the survey instrument. We need to make sure that we're not just kind of having a freewheeling conversation, but that we have a survey that allows us to keep on track with each and every interview subject, every professor we're talking to. So we knew that we needed that kind of consistency. But on the other hand, we wanted to make sure that whatever it was that we were using to conduct these interviews was responsive to the responses that we were getting earlier in the interview from the professors. So that responsiveness means that you have to have a certain degree of flexibility without sacrificing the consistency. We don't want to be asking a bunch of needlessly duplicative questions. And the prime example of this was if in a given area of skills, in a given module of the survey, if a professor says, yeah, I don't really do anything in that area at all. I don't do any legal research with my students, for example. We want to make sure that we're both giving them the opportunity with some examples to really be sure that they're not doing anything. But once a professor makes clear that in a given course they don't have responses, examples to be giving us, which we want, of course, everyone to understand is perfectly okay. We don't expect any professor to be covering all of these skill areas in a given course. But in the course of the conversation, if a professor says, yeah, I don't do that, I don't do that, I don't do that, um, in a given module, we don't want to ask them all of the same very specific particular questions. How frequently do you not do that? When in the semester do you not do that? We want a script and a survey instrument that's going to allow us to respond in real time to the responses that we're getting and not have those needlessly duplicative questions. So that's when we started sort of thinking about, and in my mind, kind of conceptualizing some sort of flow chart or decision tree format for our script for the survey. However, once I started actually playing around with the formatting on sort of this graphical flow chart, although conceptually it seemed to work very well, there were some logistical problems that I was encountering when I was trying to go past that initial stage of just kind of sketching things out and really trying to get all of this survey, which is pretty lengthy. We've got we've got a couple hundred questions here, getting all of that into the flowchart format. So there are just space logistics problems. The text ends up being very tiny on the page when you're trying to chart everything out. If you do too many pages, it sort of loses all the benefits of that graphical representation of the decision tree or the flowchart. And then, of course, we also need space to be recording responses. And so the logistics of that started getting pretty messy, which is why I lighted upon this idea of trying to make an electronic survey instrument using one of my favorite software applications, Google Forms. So I think that this online version of our survey will serve us pretty well in a number of ways. And I think some of the virtues as far as the end user is concerned are going to be apparent when I do the demo in just a moment. But to be clear about sort of what it is that we're talking about here, your experience as the user of this survey instrument is just a series of screens, easy to click through screens. You don't have to do any of the organization or design. It's available online. So we can access it through any web-enabled device. So of course you can look at it on a desktop computer, but also laptops. If one or more interviewers brings in a laptop into the session, you can very easily type very quickly and fill things out. When I was playing around with answering the survey using my iPad, which is kind of nice. It's almost like having a clipboard in your hands. So that was sort of nice. And then earlier today, I was even using my iPhone to fill out the survey as well. So any device that's going to get you on the internet is going to give you access to this form, and it's going to be usable in that way. The other great thing about these responsive forms that you're clicking through is the way I've set things up is we're getting exactly the bits and pieces of data that we're after. There is an opportunity to record some sort of narrative notes, which will be great. But as much as possible, I've tried to reduce our sort of post-interview data analysis and data coding concerns. A lot of this has been sort of reduced to drop-down menus, and that means that if the instrument's well designed, then we'll have so much less to do after the interview, and that will make it much easier for us to get to an end report. And the other great thing is, if you're wondering, well, as you're clicking through these pages, where does all the information go? The other great thing is that the instrument is set up so that all of the responses are automatically recorded into a sort of preset, organized spreadsheet. So all of our data will automatically just go straight from the clicking into a nearly end form collection of data, spreadsheet with all the good stuff that comes along with that. So I'm hoping that that's really going to minimize some of the after fact data management issues. And like I said, I'll get to some of the sort of logistics of how I did this, which I think is pretty neat, afterwards. But let me just show you for now what it looks like. And so this is an example of one of the survey modules. So this is an example of the professional identity module of the survey. And when the interviewer, when one of the users goes to the website to view the live version, the live form version of the electronic survey, this would be the first page you would see. So what I've done, and forgive me, this is still sort of rough draft version in the sense that there, every time I look at it, I see little typos and formatting concerns, but you get the basic idea. So of course, what appears on the screen is the script, or a version of the script that we've talked about using during the interviews with the professors. So this is sort of, the opening lines to the professional identity module. So, next I'd like to talk with you about some of the ways that you might be helping your students to develop their sense of professional identity as lawyers. So if no concrete examples come to mind as we're discussing particular skills, just let me know, and it'll save us some time, and we can just move on to some of the areas where you have some more examples that you might like to share. And of course, if you're ever unsure of what I mean by a term or what I mean by a question, you can always just ask. So that would be an example, of course, of how you might read that initial script. And then kind of our threshold questions here. So how important do you consider the development of professional identity to be in your course or courses? And then, we'll ask the professor to give us that scalar rating on a scale of 1 to 10. And then the next question, also sort of a lead-in question. So do you apply any particular teaching strategies or structure any particular class activities, assignments, or assessments specifically around professionalism or professional identity as lawyers? So what you would be seeing again as the interviewer here, let's say that our mock professor says, 7. It's professional identity is pretty important. I don't know if it's extremely important. Sorry about the background noise. I'm at home. I live downtown. It's noisy. So you would just click on what you want the response to be. For a question like this, you've got a drop-down menu. So do you apply any teaching strategies? I'll show you a couple different variations here. Let's assume to begin with that the professor says, no, I think professional identity is real important, but I don't teach professional responsibility or clinic, so no, I don't. So on this page, we've just got a couple of questions here, and you would, after you've entered those responses, you just click continue. And it moves you on to the appropriate next page depending upon one of the trigger responses. So the trigger response on the previous page was that yes, no question at the bottom. So the next screen is, this is what you would then be saying if the professor had said no to the question, well, so do you do anything related to professional identity in your courses? And so this is kind of our double check question, just to make sure that someone is conceptualizing the skill that we're asking about correctly. So we throw out a few examples just in case they might have second thoughts about that no response. So, okay, I'll ask you about some specific examples of the skills. Let me know if you have any that you want to share. And this is one of the sort of in draft pieces of the survey. There are a few of the modules that we have more examples of than others listed in the script right now. But this would be, we would offer a bunch of examples, then say, well, do any of these examples sound like something you might be doing with your students? And if so, let's go ahead and ask some of these individual questions about professional identity. So if the professor says yes to any example, gives any indication that we need to actually go ahead and ask some of those more specific questions, then you're going to go with yes. Now, um, if the professor says no, right, says, yeah, I mean, those things all sound great, but I'm not really doing anything like that, then obviously you would pick no. And that's okay. And then in any case, you want to go down and ask them kind of this question, especially if they say no. But if they're hesitant, they say sort of a hesitant yes, we probably want this too. So if you don't currently include any assignments in your courses that specifically focus on professional identity, um, is there anything in particular that might be keeping you from doing that? And of course, if they don't have a specific obstacle, then you just want to leave it blank. But if they give any of these other reasons, then you would want to enter that. And then finally, if what it sounds like is they really have nothing going on here, so they're able to give you maybe a reason about the obstacle or not, but they, even after you give them examples, they really feel like they don't have any information to add. If that's the case, then right here, we're going to move on to the next module. So we're going to leave the professional identity module of the survey, and we're going to move on to, to critical reasoning or client representation or whatever. And so if that was what we clicked and you went to continue, then this is going to take you to the sort of always the end page of the survey where you click the submit button. So if that was one professor's response with professional identity, you would click submit for the professional identity module, and then, like I said, you would move on to another area. But let's see what happens if we get some different responses. So we go back to the beginning, and this is going to be entered as a different interview in that final spreadsheet that we're going to be getting. So we're back to the beginning, and let's say this professor says, extremely important. Do you do anything with your students? Yes. Just click continue. Say, great. So do you think you'd be able to share with me one or two really great examples of how you work with professional identity in one of your courses? If you think you've got some examples, then we'll ask some more specific questions. Do you feel prepared to share an example? Presumably, if they say that they do this stuff, they're probably going to say, yes, I have examples I can share, but it's always possible that they would have no, in which case we would route them back to the previous screen. But so, and we click continue. And so the next screen then is where we're going to ask some of those more specific questions about some of those component skills or sub-skills in that bigger competency of professional identity. So one of our core competencies involves students' understanding of the rules, norms, and values of the legal profession. Do you do anything with your students, any assignments, any classroom activities that incorporate the competency? And then, of course, we've got that extra sort of help text there to prompt a professor if they may be sort of wondering what we're talking about is, introducing and discussing the model rules, professional ethics, all that good stuff. So once again, we've got a drop-down menu here of yes or no, and depending upon the professor's response, the survey is going to take us in different directions. And all of the possible paths that an interview could go have sort of been accounted for in the logic of the design. So you don't have to worry about any of that when you're using the instrument. Let's take a look at what would happen with this particular question if the professor says, yeah, I do some stuff with the rules and norms and values. So we're going to ask some more specifics about the rules and norms and values. Here you're able to record any notes, any narrative description that you want about the professor's activities, their assignments. And this information is going to be collected too. This is one of the things that's really great about being able to do it on a laptop is, let's see. So you would be able to enter as much or as little text there, notes for yourself. Then, of course, what course is this for? You get to enter that as well. How frequently does the activity or assignment occur? Daily throughout most of the semester. And I should note that, you know, this is a good example of trying to kind of make the responses that we're collecting be as objective and therefore as easily counted up when it's time to sort of do the reporting as possible. So, you know, once a semester, twice a semester, you don't have to just write it down, and we don't have to worry about each of us recording in different units of time or whatever. We've got something consistent there. And then, once again, let's say yes. Is it experiential learning? Well, no. Does she do a formative assessment? Let's say no. Is there a summative assessment? We'll say yes. At what point in the semester does the activity occur? If it occurs more than once, when does it first happen? And then, so those are all of the particular questions about following up on question 3 on the rules, norms, and values of the legal profession. But then before you leave the page, it's going to sort of prompt you to ask the next main area question about subskills. So one of the core competencies is integrity, honesty, or trustworthiness, right? And so you're going to ask the professor that question and use the yes or no in the drop down, because once again, the survey program is going to route you to the appropriate page depending upon what they answer here. So if they answer no to this question, then it's going to take them to a place where we're going to be able to move more quickly through the question 4 material. But if they say, yeah, no, I think I do work on their integrity and honesty, then we're going to be able to ask these sorts of more specific questions about that. So it's going to send you to the right place. So let's say yes, click continue. And then once again, now we're going to be following up on question 4 once again with those notes. And then at the bottom of the page, once again, we're going to sort of prompt for the next question about component skills, so that the program can route you to the right follow-up page. So let's say that the professor answers no to this question about covering that sort of sub-skill of understanding the importance of lawyer competence. And so I'll show you what it looks like if they answer no. So if they answered no to essentially to question 5, right, to the previous question about competence, if they say, no, I don't have anything there, instead of going through and asking them a bunch of these detailed questions about something that they've already told us that they don't have any examples of, it's going to take you to the next question, right? So the next area within the survey. So you won't have those needlessly duplicative questions. And once again, so that's another example of a no response. But let's go back to a yes. So you get to add all of your responses here. I do have it set up so that you can you can skip questions. It's not like it's going to refuse to collect your responses if you haven't answered everything. Obviously, we want to try to complete as much as possible, but if you're really in a hurry and the conversation is moving on, it won't be a problem. And so this screen is the detailed version of question 7, and for the professional identity module, question 7 is the last set of questions about sub-skills within professional identity. So because it is the last and it is therefore the end of the professional identity module, instead of having a continue button to click, you'll see a submit button. And that just means that for this particular interview, you're at the end of the module. So that is sort of an example of how this looks as far as clicking through those responsive forms. Like I said, they're going to take you to the right page no matter what the response is, every permutation, and your ability to sort of type in notes. And what I want to show you next is where all of those responses go, because this is something else that's very cool, I think, about this survey program. So when you click continue and then finally when you click submit on any of the survey modules, and then presumably complete one module for for each of those core competencies we're looking at, all of the information from your submission is automatically routed to a spreadsheet. And this is one of the great things about it being online. So it does this automatically. There is a corresponding spreadsheet, a response version of each module. And each of the, in addition to a timestamp, each of those questions that you were clicking through or recording answers is a column in our spreadsheet. And we can sort of organize that and change the headings and change some of the formatting of it. But the bottom line is, how important do you consider the development of professional identity to be in your courses? Whatever the response was for a given interviewee, that's what we've got here. And each of the interviews, each of the submissions, each time you click the submit button at the end of the module, it's going to appear as a different interview, right? And once again, if they have, there's our question. If there was no response, there'll be a blank, but otherwise it's going to give us the yes, no. It's going to, for those multiple choice, it's going to give us the responses. And it's actually, so all of our questions, all of my goofy responses, including Professor Otero. So all of that narrative text that you entered as notes, even if it's a full paragraph, it'll appear on the spreadsheet in the right column. And everything's going to be there. So it's a really nice automatic way of collecting all of that data instead of having to go through and hand score or hand code every single survey response. So that is one of the very nice things about it as well. And this is just appearing in an Excel spreadsheet, so all of the usual fun functions that you can do with Excel, you can of course do with this spreadsheet. So that's the basic idea behind the electronic survey instrument that I created for the curriculum mapping project. That's at least a little bit of a demonstration. I want to talk a little bit about some of the mechanics and the design elements of how I made this thing, but I'll do that in a separate video. So I hope that this was informative. I hope this gave you a little bit of comfort about what it is that you'll be looking at potentially during the interviews, what it is that I've tried to do here. So thanks for your time, and please let me know what you think.